Just a quick message before the video starts. If you're looking for an update on Sexton Lovecraft, just stay tuned to the end. Hello and welcome to my review of The Killer Mine by Hammond Innes. This is a 1947 thriller about a deserter returning to England after the war and looking for shelter in a Cornwall mining community. The region was the site of family drama before Jim Pryce, our protagonist, was taken by his father to live in Canada. The outbreak of World War II brought him back to Europe, and deserting during a slaughter has left him outside of the law. But returning to the town he was born in, he discovers the truth about his family and is embroiled in a murder. Can he escape justice long enough to get some of his own? Before we get into any more detail, here's a clip from a previous review of a book by Hammond Innes. Now, I have a slight confession to make. I actually picked this up by accident, and I mean literally picked it up by accident. I was trying to decide between this book and The Killer Mine, the only two options in the bookshop for Hammond Innes. And after plumping for The Killer Mine, I got home to discover I'd picked the wrong one up. So we're not all perfect. So here it is at last, the long-delayed review of The Killer Mine, which begins with Jim Pryce, our first-person narrator, describing the final throwings of his boat journey home from Italy to Cornwall. He was with the British Army in Italy, deserted his post, and then worked in Italian mines before chancing his luck with people smugglers and a trip to his ancestral home. Pryce, though, drinks too much and has flapped his lips among some pretty unscrupulous types who are all set to rob him. He is lucky, in fact, to survive the journey, and that Captain Mulligan, even though he steals 90% of his money, is honourable enough to leave him with £5, which in 1947 would last you a little while. Pryce also has a letter from an old war colleague, Dave Tanner, who promises him a mining job with a Cornwall contact. That contact is Captain Manak, a smuggler living with his father, a former miner, and Kitty, the daughter of one of his father's ex-wives. Manak is smuggling alcohol from the continent and wants Pryce to open up one of the old mine tunnels to the sea so that his boats can land and unload easier. The prologue at sea is actually one of the weaker parts of the book. Pryce appears as a weak drunk. The tension in this section isn't quite where it ought to be, but even here there are lines that have an interesting turn of phrase or introduce an idea that keeps things rolling, like here with the unusual but effective use of the verb seethed. The great granite cliffs were very near now. They seemed reared up high into the night, a line of white seethed at their foot. Though it has to be said that reusing the same verb in a similar way later lessens the power of this moment for me. It's a shame it was repeated like this. Only 50 years ago, the whole area seethed with activity, because this later, somewhat similar passage uses the unusual verbs grinned and slathered to personify the setting and up the threat and tension. Innes really returns to that original high. The ugly black teeth of rock grinned at us. The surf slavered through them as though waiting to tear our bodies to pieces. Back at the mine, Manak's father is very much opposed to flooding it, knowing that the seawater will make extracting a rich load of tin ore impossible. He offers to pay Pryce off, but circumstances render the offer moot. Throughout the second and third chapter, Innes works hard to build the tension with passages that promote the idea of coming disaster and threat. And yet, I will say this, that if I had been told as I strode over the mist-shrouded road to Penzance that I was walking straight into a terrible mine disaster, not only that, but into a pitiful story of madness and greed that involved my own family history, then I just should not have believed it. I have set down in detail the manner of my return to my native Cornwall because, like a prelude to an opera, it was all part of the strange events that followed. I could have broken that thread of destiny, and so would never have discovered what happened to my mother. Though not the final sentences of the chapters, this is the sort of thing that is used more extensively in those circumstances by more modern authors like Lee Child. Innes uses his hooks effectively because Pryce is moving around Penzance looking for Tanner and Manak without the plot or prose really carrying much else to build the excitement. This section carries a lot of backstory, which is essential to Innes' story going forward, but quite a lot of it is related via dialogue. It's a little heavy, and perhaps relating some of this in a different manner, such as a flashback, for example, might just have made it a little bit more lively. If it was, Innes wouldn't need to sew in so many hints about what's to come in order to retain his audience's attention. This is especially true when your dialogue is phonetics heavy, like in this example. It makes it hard work. Things improve rapidly when Dave Tanner returns, now accused of murdering 4 customs officials, and with Pryce himself having been in town inquiring of Tanner's whereabouts at the time, he's also wanted as an accomplice. Already wanted as a deserter, Pryce's options are very limited, and Manak moves him to a store in the mine where nobody will look for him. When he finishes the job, Manak promises to arrange safe passage overseas. Interestingly, this is beyond page 100 of a 200-page book called The Killer Mine, and it's about the first time that Pryce goes underground. He isn't there long before he pops back up to see Kitty, who tells him about his family history in the area, that his mother, Manak Sr.'s housekeeper, had killed his wife and then been driven insane by the consequences and confined to the attic, killing herself when she was able to be free. The old miner having another wife too that died in suspicious circumstances. Despite the threat of the police, Pryce spends very little of his time in hiding by actually hiding. Mostly he yo-yos up and down, visiting Kitty, even when Tanner arrives having been sold out by one of his girlfriends and ordered to guard him in the mine. Pryce begins the plan to blast through the rock to the sea above and open up the cave for Manak's smugglers. While down there, the tension rises when first he's led on a wild goose chase by Manak Sr. through the labyrinthian tunnels and then abandoned and expected to die. He is saved by Kitty, who has some familiarity with the mine. As the blasting continues, Pryce's helper, Fryer, is increasingly nervous. Though not a miner, it's clear he is more than uncommonly worried about being trapped down below, and he refuses to tell Pryce why until the blasting is very nearly complete. Pryce learns that Manak Sr. has been drilling in a nearby mine shaft, and that if his work collapses, it will fill the area that they're in with water and with no way of escape. It is to Innes's credit that this passage is really quite effective. The claustrophobia of the underground mine builds nicely. The only real issue is that there are only so many words for things in mines, so words like adit and gallery reoccur a touch too regularly. This section uses water too much. There's a lot of gushing and gurgling and far too much ochre. So much so that on this page you can see Innes is aware that there's too much and is working on alternatives. When Fryer flees before the last charges are set, Pryce, ever the miner, intends to see things through on his own. He's called away by Kitty and, concerned with her safety, is on his way up when the worst case scenario plays out. The one lift passes them by with Fryer and the others on board, but then sticks in the shaft. Pryce and Kitty are forced to go lower, below sea level, and swim through the flooding caves to freedom. They succeed, return to the surface, but are too late to free the gig, and the others are trapped below as the sea levels continue to rise. Pryce, in possession of documents that grant him control of Manak's Italian holdings, offers to marry Kitty, and the two head off for sunnier climes. Overall, The Killer Mine is not the book I expected. I rather expected a book about a mine disaster with men trapped and working to free themselves. Although Pryce and Kitty are trapped and brave enough to free themselves, that section of the book is kept mostly to a single chapter of the book's 10. Instead, there's a mystery around Pryce's family background, which is kind of predictable, but not as completely resolved as you might expect. The final passages in Cornwall are dark, as the back cover promises, but the epilogue with Kitty and Pryce heading to Italy is not. Is that a little incongruous, perhaps? I think some may consider that it is, particularly because Kitty, like most of the girls in the book, are a little Victorian. The backstory of Pryce's mother is the sort of melodrama best left in that era. She's told she's mad, and that's why she can't remember committing a murder. This book is set in 1947, and while it wasn't every woman that worked their way through two war efforts, I doubt too many were quite that weak in any era. Kitty is quite prone to wailing and moaning, though the time of her life that Pryce is pushing for more information on is obviously traumatic. There really is a fine line between convincing emotional pain and an author deliberately withholding information that can easily make things unconvincing. When a character resorts to a line like this, women are funny creatures. To explain away something that probably isn't explainable, the line becomes even thinner. Early on in the book, Pryce's illegal entry into the country, his role in an illegal labour market, seem surprisingly current, especially when a local shop worker reads this passage in the local newspaper. You'll find them on the racetracks, in the black market, running restaurants, selling bad liquor, organising prostitution, gambling and vice, dealing in second-hand cars, phony antiques, stolen clothing. They're mixed up in every rotten racket in the country. Parasites, that's what this paper calls them, and that's what they are. It really feels like something that might be said of illegal immigrants in our own time. The more things change, I guess. While Pryce's status as a deserter might make him less sympathetic, it becomes a really important part of how and why he ends up trapped in such a difficult situation. Innes does mention the circumstances of his defection, but not in any great detail, and again it's something that, if related in more, might help build character and even tension. If, for example, Pryce had been trapped underground during the war, it would later exacerbate his discomfort in the mines. It might have helped if woven with those sections in the mine to avoid a little of that repetition. Overall, though, The Killer Mind feels somewhat dated, especially in the depiction of its female characters, though in the end Kitty proves as brave, if not more so, than anybody. She is a little bit of a Victorian fainter before that. The degree of redemption and or growth in any character, though, is obviously welcome. The tension Innes injects through hints of mystery and then playing on the fairly common fear of being trapped or drowning work really well. The Killer Mind is not as spectacular as I thought it might be, but there's more than enough going on to keep it interesting right through to the final dramatic mine collapse. As both a solid mystery and a solid thriller, it's almost double value, so recommended to fans of the likes of Alistair MacLean and maybe even Lee Child. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more of this sort of thing. And the promised update on Sexton Lovecraft is that all of the books have been sent out if you backed the project and have responded to the survey asking for your postal address. So if you haven't done that yet, please do it as quickly as you can. Thank you. Give me your address. I'll get your book out as soon as I have it. And I would very much welcome, if you have read it, that you share your feedback with me. There's an email on the screen as I'm saying this. If you want to send some feedback to that, that's great. Otherwise, you can leave it in the comments. On top of that, obviously, when you order something along these lines, you always overprint to a degree. So I do have a handful of books. So if you think I would have liked one and didn't back the project, then just, again, email that address. We'll sort something out. Feel free to skip this bit because it's a bit of a sob story, is that unfortunately for American backers, I am going to have to look at alternative postage systems in the future. That's not a problem this time. If you're in America, don't worry, I have sent you a book. But what happened was I took a book package to the post office and said, how much will this be to post to America? They told me it'd be £8. So that's what I put on the Kickstarter. If you backed it, it said like £10 for the book, £8 for the postage to where you are, which I know is a bit unfortunate. It's a lot of money for a book, so I don't blame anyone that was just a little bit put off by that. But what has actually happened was that was wrong. That was an error, and the postage to America that they charged me when I actually sent the books out was £18. If you're an American, you want a book, don't worry, I will look into ways of getting it to you that are a lot cheaper than that, and if there isn't one, then we'll just have to wait until they're available digitally or something like that, because that price is just so cost prohibitive for myself to pay. Obviously, I've taken a massive hit by charging you £8 and then being charged £18. I've effectively made a loss on every book that I sold to America. But yeah, sub story, I know. Like I said, there are a handful left. In fact, there's that many. And I've just creased the back cover of that one. So there's that many. 5 or 6. If you're interested in one, just email that address, we'll sort it out. And just lastly, of course, another thank you to those that did support the book. I really do appreciate it.